Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for today's Titan Talk, Dropping Anchor, my new approach to news with Demetria Kalodimos. I am really pleased to have Demetria as a speaker. She is a brilliant source in journalism, and I'm very certain that we are all going to learn a lot today. Just a few housekeeping notes before we jump into everything. You are viewing today's webinar as an audience member. Therefore, you do not have the ability to turn on your video or your microphone. Questions are going to be encouraged and can be submitted through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. There is going to be dedicated time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So again, feel free to ask your questions at any time. I will get to as many as I can at the end. If you run into a technical issue, you can reach out to our Office of Alumni Engagement at 309-556-3145 or by email at iwualum@iwu.edu. A recording of today's webinar is going to be available to view on the Office of Alumni Engagement YouTube page, and you will be sent a link and a short survey tomorrow afternoon. I'd love for you to complete it if you can. All righty. And so then at this time, I'm so pleased to introduce Demetria Kalodimos, class of 1981. Demetria is a trusted voice in Middle Tennessee, and she has anchored and reported the news for more than 40 years. She has won some of the top awards in broadcast journalism, including 16 Emmys, 3 Investigative Reporters and Editors National Awards, and 3 Edward R. Murrow Awards for investigative reporting. Demetria was consistently voted the best local anchor by readers of the Tennessean and the Nashville Scene, and she was inducted into the Tennessee Journalism Hall of Fame in 2016. She holds a master's degree in journalism from the University of Illinois and a Bachelor of Music Education and an honorary doctorate from Illinois Wesleyan University. She is the executive producer at the Nashville Banner and the 2021 Journalism Professional in Residence at Lipscomb University. She also, because she's not busy enough, she also produces her own award-winning documentaries, music videos, and other visual content through her company, Genuine Human Productions, which is headquartered at the filming station. And Demetria, I'd love to jump right in here with some questions. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Kaylee. The one thing I didn't get in that long resume was any sort of a degree in tech, because we were having a little bit of a problem dealing with Zoom, but it's all good. It all worked out.
Yes, we are on your phone. I'm talking loudly. So if you are on your computer screen at work, maybe turn me down a little bit and turn Demetria up when we're flipping back and forth.
Right.
Let's start here with kind of your early Illinois Wesleyan years. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your ambitions growing up in high school? What did you initially want to be? And then when did that evolve to be, I want to be in journalism?
It's funny. I was actually a transfer into Illinois Wesleyan. I intended to go as a freshman and went down and did my music audition, which at the time, and I think you did in person at the time. I'm sure now it's through a link or a YouTube or something. But I remember going down, loving the campus, really having every plan in the world to go to Wesleyan in the fall. But spoiler alert, and this, I hope if there are any young women listening to this, never stay home or change your plans because of a boyfriend. Okay. Is that not the oldest story in the book? But yes, that's what kept me at home for my first 2 years of school, where I actually went to rival North Park College at the time. Totally enjoyed it. But when the time became right for me to transfer to Wesleyan, I didn't hesitate a bit. It's tough, though, coming to a campus as a junior.
Yeah.
One thing, if everyone else is an underclassman and college is new and they're new, and I had to constantly correct people that I wasn't a freshman. Luckily, I wasn't living, and nothing against Munsell or the other freshman dorms at the time. They put me in what was more like an upper class dorm at Dodds Hall, so I felt a little bit more at home. But I wanted to be a musician. I had spent my whole life from the 3rd grade on. My parents had spent a lot of money on lessons, and I had every intention to go on and teach music. But about my junior year, when I first started at Wesleyan, I got bit by the campus radio bug. Okay, WESN. My parents used to say I heard the sound of my own voice, and I fell in love with it because I never stopped talking after that. But in all seriousness, I learned everything you could learn about DJing a show and queuing up at the time LPs. I'm dating myself. And that led to a winter term, little short-term stint at a local radio station, and I never looked back. I thought, this is what I need to do. This is what comes naturally to me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was in the newsroom in that small station in Normal when John Lennon was shot and killed.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of times news people mark where they are in their career by gigantic events. You know, I've seen 9/11, I saw the Challenger explosion, I saw so many things that happened, but that was my first real milestone news event. And I believe that was in 81.
Okay. Well, and so then you come to Wesleyan as a junior, as a music education major. You keep the music education major. Was that intentional? You know, as a backup option if journalism didn't work out, or were you just so far in at that point, you're like, no, I'm finishing it out?
That's really what it was, Kaylee. I mean, if there are any music majors out there, I think we got like 3 electives during the course of 4 years. So you're very, very steeped in the curriculum. I still love music, and I might add that I feel like I use it every single day in my job and have continued to use it in so many ways. But I thought the easier path would be finish up, get my degree in music and go right into grad school in journalism. Surprise, surprise, that wasn't so easy. Even though I had, you know, wonderful GPA and good test scores, I was an unproven commodity. You know, no one had seen me on camera. No one has seen samples of my writing, but I convinced U of I to let me in. And I proudly can say that I was the first person with full-time employment out of my graduate class.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, and I believe you worked while you're working full-time, correct? During that last year?
It was in Champaign. There was an NBC affiliate at the time, which sadly no longer exists, and a powerhouse CBS affiliate. And usually when I tell people, oh, I started in Champaign, they always point to that powerhouse station. And I have to say, no. I was at the one that 3 people watched, you know, but nevertheless, I really learned a lot of skills. It was WICD. And from day one, I was writing, producing, anchoring, shooting in some cases, editing tape. I mean, it was the greatest sort of apprenticeship you could ever get. But the problem was I wasn't an apprentice. I was an anchor, starting as an anchor. And it was a wonderful opportunity. And I still have lifelong friends from that station because we were kind of like the WKRP in Cincinnati, but we were the WICD in Champaign.
And so then you're managing your schoolwork while working that full-time position. Do you keep that position that first year out of grad school, or is that when you switch over and move to Tennessee?
No, I stayed on. I was at ICD for just shy of 3 years. And then I started sending out my resume tape. That's what we did, folks, before email and the internet. You had to send out a tape of your work that demonstrated what you could do. And it was about the size of a large shoebox. And it also was kind of expensive, I believe. And I saw a pay stub the other day. I was making $150 a week, which seemed like, you know, millions at the time. But that shoebox size tape cost $40. So sending it out without the guarantee that it would ever come back to you was like half your paycheck going out. So I did that for some months, and there were ads in the back of a publication called Broadcasting Magazine, believe it or not. And I was one of the few people who can say I found my job in Broadcasting Magazine. Nashville came calling. That was the winter of 1983. And I started here in February 1984, thinking I'd stay for 3 years. And then, 34 years later, I was still in the same job.
You had to really like Nashville, though. Like, it definitely had to become a part of like your home base.
Yeah, it was a much, much different place back then. I don't know if any of our listeners and viewers have been to Music City in a while, but it has exploded. It's no longer the small town that I was charmed by in the beginning. Not to say that that's bad, but it's feeling more and more every day like a big city. So it really is sort of a different atmosphere.
Yeah, I can definitely believe that, even just from our alumni, where do all of our alumni live? Nashville has certainly grown, particularly post-pandemic. It's really exploded with a larger number of alums living in the area.
Yeah, and fun fact, probably you guys need to have, if you haven't already on a Titan Talk, Burke Nihill, who is the GM of the Tennessee Titans, our NFL football team. So we have a Wesleyan grad at the helm of our football team, which is pretty cool.
Yes, definitely really cool. Burke actually was the commencement speaker this past May. He was on campus again. So, okay, so I think sitting at the desk, being on live television seems very intimidating. Even these Zooms before everyone, I'm like, whew, okay, this is all live. Let's go. How do you manage that stress, or did you have something that, was there a pre-ritual before you went on? How did you manage that? And then kind of part two, did you ever have a time where it didn't go right? And then how do you manage that moment?
How much time do we have for me to tell stories? It felt a lot like today. I always wanted to get on the set at least 15 minutes ahead of time. So I had my Zoom all set up a half an hour ahead of time. And what do you know? Technical difficulties. My ritual, the most important thing, and people always say, oh, are those papers on your desk just a prop? Absolutely not. Technical problems happen. Teleprompters go totally blank, or they turn upside down, or the camera, now that we have robotic cameras, it whips across the room. So the most important thing to me was having a physical script. And as the time went on and we became more and more reliant on computer copy and iPads and screens, I would have quite a few disagreements with some of the associate producers about why I needed those papers, because they were the ultimate safety net. So my ritual was, as long as I didn't have shoes on, because something about wearing shoes on the set made me uncomfortable. As long as I didn't have shoes on, I had my bedroom slippers and I had my physical papers, I could do okay. Well, times have changed. Now, if you notice, most anchors are standing up. Not only do you see their entire wardrobe, but you see their shoes as well. So I probably got out just in the nick of time.
I don't know. I think the slippers would have made you very human-like. I think everyone is watching in their slippers at home. You're relating to the people.
That's true.
So what about your process? How do you select the stories, particularly those investigative pieces? Are those being brought to you? Are you selecting them yourself?
A combination of both. In the earlier years, especially when I was a younger reporter and I was, basically still learning, particularly on investigations, looking for someone to mentor me in those processes. We'd go with a mutually decided assigned story. But the real fun came when I started enterprising my own ideas. And how does a journalist find an idea? Curiosity, using your eyes, ears, noticing things that are out of the ordinary, trends that are happening that hadn't happened before. Of course, things you overhear at a cocktail party. That's an amazing source of news. But basically just fine-tuning those antennae to know what is a newsworthy story. It was funny, a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned something, we've got a big mayor's race down here. Okay. And we were deciding on questions to ask. And I threw out a question that got kind of a lukewarm reception from my colleagues on the panel. And when I decided to ask it in the forum afterwards, every one of the candidates and several of the people in the audience said, that was the best question of the night. So I say that because young reporters need to trust their instincts. If it's important to you, if it's important to people that you live around or live with, it's probably a story.
Wow. I'm going to shift gears here for a second, if you don't mind, and talk kind of more globally, and mostly here about your local newspapers. We're seeing thousands of local newspapers have closed in recent years. We are seeing reporters laid off, circulation issues. Can you talk a little bit about that local decline in journalism?
Well, so much of it is due to a broken business model. let's remember, back when I started in television, there were 3 network affiliates and a spunky little upstart called CNN that no one thought would last. Okay, how smart we were. But people were reliant on that. This was even pre-VCR. It was appointment viewing. You had to sit in front of the television at a certain time of day, and you only had usually 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock to do it. Therefore, people were dedicated to that medium. Advertisers would also pay big money because those eyeballs were guaranteed to be there every night at 6 and at 10. Well, here comes cable, then comes the internet, then comes social media, and the car dealer doesn't want to spend thousands for 30 seconds or 15 seconds on television when they can spend that money in myriad other ways on other media. So therein lies the broken business model. Advertising heavy revenue is just not there anymore. The pie is millimeter sized slivers now. So as a result, newspapers all over the country, I think the last count was something like 2,000 newspapers have closed. And it's economics. It costs money to circulate a newspaper. It certainly costs money to pay the journalists to print it on paper. That's why so few actually printed pieces are still out there. And unfortunately, there are still some venture capitalists and hedge funds that believe that gobbling up what were once revenue producing machines, that they can eke out that much more profit, and that comes at the expense of the journalism. So kind of a long-winded answer to say it simply needs to be and is being reinvented. And that's why we're doing the nonprofit model here in Nashville. I might say that we still have 4 network affiliates here. We have an ABC, NBC, CBS, and a Fox. And I don't think I'm the first person that has predicted that not all 4 of those will be healthy and still viable in, let's say, 10 years.
Wow. Well, and we now see some streaming services picking up your local news and playing them delayed or playing them live. But again, that's more on a national level, not necessarily locally to you. And I'm assuming that continues. Maybe that becomes more of a live activity every single time, right?
Everything's changed. Back when I started, you would be assigned a story. You'd go out, work on it all day, find the people to talk to, find the documentation, put that story together again for that big ta-da at 6 o'clock. In local news these days, journalists barely ever come into the building. They're operating out of live vans. They're working on their laptops or off of their phones. I know some journalists in television that probably don't go back to the ranch for every 10 days, maybe just to pick up mail or something, or check in on a meeting. So it's very much a live, immediate, approach. And that's good in some ways and bad in others. Never have we had such immediacy and access to information as it's happening, but also never before have we had so many errors. And I think that, and rushes to judgment and rushes to incorrect information. And I think that's had a significant effect on the loss of trust in media.
And that's a great question there. And what red flags should people be aware of when they're finding their sources right now?
Well, if you hear something that is so out there and you cannot find it to confirm or back up or even dig deeper on other sources, chances are that is a story that is not true. It's either clickbait, it's something that's happening. It catches your eye because it's so fantastic, or it's so different from what you've been hearing elsewhere. And of course, good investigative journalism does break new ground, and it is different. But sooner or later, you'll be able to see other sources and get confirmation from other places that story, at least the germ and the framework of that story, is true. If you see something that's so out there and you never see it again, chances are it was indeed, and I hate to use it, I will not use the word FAKE news, but it's questionable news.
You spoke about it a little earlier, but you are actually an executive producer at Nashville Banner, which is a nonpartisan independent newsroom. Can you talk a little bit about this nonprofit news sector? What makes it different in terms of
Sure.
the operational aspect?
It may sound new to some, but it's been around for a good solid 12 or 13 years. The notion really started in Texas with something called the Texas Tribune. And some journalists there had noticed that it was a state capital, much like Nashville. And journalists noticed that state government was not being adequately covered. And Texas is, its own country, basically. So they started in Austin with a real concentrated effort on covering state government like a blanket. And after a while, so many important stories were being generated by this outfit called the Texas Tribune that it was being quoted much like Associated Press in all the other satellite cities. And sooner or later, it was the biggest source. It began growing and growing. And now it's sort of the granddaddy and the example of best practices in nonprofit news. But you might recognize some other names. You hear about ProPublica. That too is a nonprofit newsroom, meaning there is, obviously no need to post a profit for shareholders or no need to show ratings growth, although you need to be viable, obviously. And here in Nashville, we're going to do that with a membership approach, much like National Public Radio and public television. But we're being pretty careful to launch with scale and to launch with enough funding so that we're not out there hat in hand, every 6 weeks asking for more money. So if all goes well, by the end of this summer, we're in a soft launch now, but if all goes well, we'll have 2 full years of our operating expenses to have a newsroom of 10 and a support staff of 5, which doesn't sound like a lot, but ladies and gentlemen, that's a lot of people in a newsroom.
Yeah. Well, and certainly, who better to lead that, right, than you with your many years of experience? Okay, what are some pros? There's pros and cons to everything, right? So what would be that pros and cons to nonprofit news?
I think the pros are from coming out of television like I did, where everything was so ratings driven, and we would sometimes save stories, even if they were of importance to the audience, just so we could get better numbers in November or February or July or the different sweeps months, so that ratings pressure is off. You don't have to worry about the overnights. You have a little bit more freedom to cover, in my case, cover things with depth. It doesn't have to be a minute and a half. Most of my pieces for the Banner have been upwards of 8, 9, 10 minutes. And again, that doesn't sound long to some, but a 60-minute style story, if you will, versus a very quick blurb that you might see on regular local news. So the pros are definitely not having to worry about ratings, not having to worry about advertisers per se, no pressure that you're going to lose someone if you do a negative story. And at the same time, being able to dig in. You can also hopefully innovate and cover maybe some communities that have been underserved. We hope to be translating into Spanish. We have a significant Spanish-speaking population here in Nashville, and they really have no unique media coverage all their own. So we're going to be exploring things like that. Cons, people still are stuck with certain sources. They don't necessarily go out there and experiment, although more are doing that these days. But we were kind of smart. We adopted the name Nashville Banner, which was our afternoon newspaper here that closed in the 90s. So to longtime Nashvillians, that means news. Instantly, they hear the Banner and they know that, hey, that's a newspaper. A lot of people think we're going to be tossing it on their front lawn. No, it's going to be online only. And I think, the cons are few, because we desperately need to get back to breadth and importance in local broadcasting. And with so many pressures on having 6 shows a day, I dare say if you watch your local news, you will see the same story repurposed 3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah.
You'll also turn on and see, they'll check in with the weather person 5 times in a half an hour. That is all an indicator that there isn't enough personnel or bandwidth, if you will, to cover what's really happening in the community and get it to the people.
That's, I mean, great tip too, and definitely something I didn't know about. Where do you see journalism going next? I know that's a very tough, broad question, but what's next for journalism as a whole?
I think people are thirsty for journalism that is transformative, accurate, eye-opening, important to their daily lives, and stories that help them make decisions. We're all captivated by a cat in a tree, or I joke, but those sort of small talker stories, that water cooler kind of material. But how many of us can really talk about what needs to happen? We had a tragic school shooting here in Nashville a couple of months ago. It's leading to a special session of the legislature. It really is a moment that is a major showdown in a state that holds the Second Amendment so dear. We really need to hear all voices and cover what's happening in government in a meaningful way that lasts more than perhaps 2 minutes at a time. Yeah. So, there's just so much work to be done. And I think the way that other nonprofit, nonpartisan newsrooms are doing it without worry again about someone coming down and pulling the funding of the organization, you can be more courageous. Journalists can be courageous again.
That's awesome. Let's shift here to your adventures of now. In 2000, you established Genuine Human Productions. What made you want to start your own production company? And can you kind of share a story or two about, those first years of creation?
One of the things was, I've been talking about it all this time, having the opportunity to have a little bit more time to really tell a story. News had gotten so tight, and I had all these great ideas, shoe boxes and file cabinets full of great ideas, but it was like, I can't say, I can't talk about that person in 2 minutes. There's too much there. There's too much depth. So the station that I worked for in the early days, we did regular documentaries where we would carve out a half an hour or an hour of prime time and present a long form piece. And I absolutely love that. I think that's why I stayed at the station as long as I did, for the opportunity to produce that kind of work. So I got to thinking, well, if I can't do it on TV, why don't I do it on my own? I've got the skills, I've got the friends, I've got the colleagues that can help me. And so we started out doing, at first, just short documentaries and short pieces, and then expanded into longer form things. And it was a blast. I've got to tell you, it was so much fun. Most of my subject matter had to be Nashville centric, because let's face it, if you're on the news 3 times a night, you can't go to Tibet and live with the monks and, do some piece like that. So I kind of made my specialty true stories about real people. That's a huge umbrella if you think about it. True in that I'm not into, writing a screenplay and coming up with a story. That's great. That's great for Spielberg and all those other filmmakers. But I think the true stories are just as compelling, if not more so. And real people that lived around here. So just to give you an idea, my first doc was about an underground cult radio preacher who, the question out there was, is this guy real or is this someone just putting us on? Okay. And it became so important to musicians on the road that everyone from the Stones to Elvis Costello to, all these people could quote this guy chapter and verse. And I started thinking to myself, okay, everyone's always laughing and listening to these things, but is this guy real or was he real? So I set out to tell that story. And I'm not going to spoil it, but I did find an answer to that. The second long documentary I did was kind of along the same lines. We had a very quirky criminal here in the early days of Nashville who obsessively stomped on women's feet. I kid you not. He was arrested just hundreds of times. It was so strange that the filmmaker John Waters, who personifies the word strange, he actually wrote a character in one of his pieces called that stomped on women's feet, inspired by this. All of a sudden, he disappeared. And we were sitting in the newsroom one day saying, what in the world happened to the foot stomper? Because everyone knew about it. And so I set out to find him. And the answer is yes, I did find him. So since then, I did another documentary on two women in the 70s who were kind of like, one of them was Madonna before Madonna, I swear, with the ripped fishnets and the feathers in her hair. And I mean, she literally had adopted that street style long before Madonna. And that was really a thrill. Again, it was like, where are these people? We've got to find them. That seems to be a thread for me. I'm always playing detective, trying to find where people are.
If anyone has an interest in viewing any of these documentaries, where would they find those?
Oh, they can find them on my website, genuinehuman.com. Believe it or not, I still, sell DVDs. They're also, I'm going to start some streaming on a Vimeo channel. And really the most recent thing we did through Genuine Human was a 13-part PBS songwriter series that stars not me, I'm nowhere to be seen, stars my husband, who is a career singer-songwriter here in Nashville. And we got the idea that we have all these talented friends, and when they sit around the living room, it's just amazing to hear them swap stories and sing together. And I thought, wow, let's make that into a TV show. Now, there are a lot of songwriter shows. And if those of you who have been down to Nashville have ever been to like the Bluebird Cafe, those pick and song swaps, guitar pulls, they call them, are sort of iconic. But this show went out all over the world, really, because it's still available on Amazon Prime. It's called Barnegie Hall. That's like Carnegie, but in a barn. And we had representative of the 13 episodes, like the equivalent of 46 #1 songs. So we're talking about, the cream of the crop songwriters. And we really hope to revive that. We shot it in 2015. We released it in 2016. As I said, it's still out there and pretty much evergreen because stuff like that doesn't grow old. But we still have people say, when are you going to do more? And I would love nothing more than to continue producing Barnegie Hall. And there you go. There's my music education and my journalism and filmmaking all coming together.
It's a very liberal arts approach for you. That's for sure.
There you go.
Well, and you've worked with other family members in the past as well. You and your niece, Allie Daskalopoulos, class of 2018, you just did a podcast series, Carol's Last Christmas, which actually covers a Bloomington Normal case, if I'm not mistaken, 1975 cold case of Carol Rofstead. What's it like working with family, your husband, your niece? I mean, tell me about that experience.
Well, I should probably premise that with, we're Greek, okay? My big fat Greek wedding, that's a real deal. We are always in each other's faces, but it's been wonderful. Actually, I've got to give all the credit to Allie, 2018 Wesleyan grad, just finished her master's at DePaul in journalism. And oddly, we're born on the same day. Oh, so we're extremely close. But she found this story when she was doing a classroom assignment and said, there's more to this. And she found an old detective who had, a voluminous file on the case, which still is unsolved. And she said, this sounds like a podcast to me. So, it was during COVID. We didn't have much else to do on a regular basis. And we just started. The beauty of podcast, of course, is that you can call someone up on the phone. You don't necessarily need video. And we started digging into this case. And the result was Carol's Last Christmas, or I should say is Carol's Last Christmas. We've got 11 episodes out right now. We continue to work on it. We will have new episodes. And the amazing thing is that, it is a case that happened in Normal, right down the street in 1975. And, we always think in today's world, Carol's name would be known all over the place. She'd be as well known as, you say John Benet Ramsey, everyone knows that name. The other girl, and they just made a break in that case. Forgive me.
Madeline
The one that
McKay?
was, yes. Anyway, back then we didn't have widespread media. And also, oddly, back then, certain crimes were not covered. Sex crimes involving young women simply did not get the attention from law enforcement, and certainly did not get media attention. There was a thinking that somehow the victim would be embarrassed if their case became, too prominent. But at the same time, sadly, we have so many cases that went unsolved. And now that we have DNA, if we had, taken better forensic evidence back then, we might be able to clear just dozens of cases. I don't know if this necessarily, there is still an unsolved 1978 case on the Wesleyan campus that was quite notorious. And I'm doing a little bit of freedom of information work on that right now. And unfortunately, not finding much of a police record. And I know for women, my sorority sisters remember this case. And when we all got together recently, we were talking about it, and they said, DK, you should look into that one. So I am, but I don't know how much we'll be able to find out about that. So Wesleyan grads, you know what I'm talking about probably. And if you know anything about that case, email me at carolslastchristmas@gmail.com.
I would love to see, the American fascination with anything crime related is so high right now. And so, certainly everything you and Allie are doing is very active to what we're all interested in, which I don't know what that all says about American citizens, that we all love our criminology, but here we are, right?
Yeah. And I know there are other, I get the Wesleyan magazine and I always read it cover to cover. And I know there are several other people that are writing about it and that are experts in the field of forensic evidence and stuff. And we've all got the Titan roots in common. So maybe we can all collaborate at some level at some point in time and solve some of these cases.
Yeah, that would be very cool. Definitely something the alumni office would have to hear about if you do.
Yes.
One last question here for you, and then we'll turn over to the audience question. So again, if you have one, please feel free to put it in the Q&A feature, and I will get through as many as I can here before our hour is up. But you have, I would say, one of your more newer titles is that you are now a professor at Lipscomb. What is that like, being in front of the classroom, being a teacher? Again, not necessarily music teaching that you initially went to school for, but certainly, it applies to everything you initially sought out to do.
Well, listen, I will say first that I send out big props to any college professors out there, any faculty from Wesleyan that are listening or watching this, because it is not easy. The amount of preparation, wanting your classes to be engaging, being available for students, all of that was a real eye-opener to me. I thought, I can handle this. I've covered breaking news and I've done all this other stuff. Teaching's a whole different story. You've got to be on your game. And I had a great experience with my class. We decided, I said, this has to be project-based for the kind of thing that I was teaching, documentary. We can't just kind of talk about it. Not only do we have to see them, let's make one. So a colleague said, hey, they've got a symposium every year at the Baseball Hall of Fame up in Cooperstown. And I've been a baseball fan since, the '69 Cubs and growing up in Chicago. So we decided to try to do a baseball story that could be produced here in Nashville and present a short documentary at the hall. Long story short, we took our whole semester And we told the story of an icon in Nashville baseball, which is our guitar-shaped scoreboard. It came up as a quirky marketing idea way back when the minor league team started, but it became so important to the public that now we've got this big, shiny, wonderful new stadium, and they got an even better guitar-shaped scoreboard. But the funny, the quirky story behind that and how sentimental that became to fans. At first, my students said, I said, how about the guitar scoreboard? And everyone was like, yeah, what about it? I said, well, I don't know. Let's start researching. Let's start calling people. Let's start seeing, who was proposed to on the guitar shaped scoreboard. And lo and behold, and your baseball fans will know this name, R.A. Dickey, who was a Cy Young award-winning knuckleballer, grew up here in Nashville. And he grew up at that stadium. And in our documentary, he actually says, if I could have that thing in my backyard, I would. And when we presented it at the Hall of Fame, there wasn't a dry eye. And they were like, what are you guys going to do next year? But, we didn't get to go this year, but it was a whole lot of fun getting the students excited. And I think once they got cameras in their hands, and once they were sitting in the edit room, and once they were calling people and discovering things, the true magic of storytelling came alive.
Yeah. That'd be a very expensive thing to have in your backyard, I'm sure, though.
A little big too.
Yes. All righty. So one audience member has asked here, what advice would you give to your younger self? Specifically, maybe to somebody who's a recent graduate tuning in, sorry.
A recent graduate that wants to do news, maybe?
Just open-ended. What advice would you give to your younger self at that age?
And I'm going to sound like your parents or probably one of your professors, but I cannot stress to you enough how important the skill of writing is, regardless of the path you take. Of course, in journalism, broadcast or otherwise, it's the way we communicate, knowing how to use language, being a fast writer, being an accurate writer, being a creative writer. It can be learned. I had some of my students at Lipscomb say, I hate writing, but I want to be a journalist. And I was like, no, first of all, no, you don't hate writing. And secondly, we can make you a better writer. And part of that comes from being a better reader, right? Introducing yourself to so many other people that are out there doing the craft and wondering, analyzing, why can they say so much with so few words? So I can't stress it enough, writing, and curiosity. I think I've always loved both, and hopefully that's why I've had some degree of success, but do not hate writing. Never say I hate writing, because you don't and you won't if you learn about it.
Yeah, definitely one of those core skills that you just have to have. You have to evolve to have. Okay, here's another one we have. Is there a future for politically neutral journalism? It seems like we had a golden age of that during the late 20th century. But now, for example, Fox News became way more popular than CNN until CNN started to slant liberal. Yes, there we go. It seems that that we are in a golden age of people wanting only confirmation journalism.
Right. I certainly hope so. In terms of, is there a future? That's what we're trying to do with our nonprofit and nonpartisan project. Let's remember, though, that every word you choose, every topic you choose to cover, someone out there will perceive that you are covering it for a reason or in a certain way. So I think the best solution for that, though, is to have robust editorial oversight, to have people of different backgrounds, generations, genders, ethnicities in the room when stories are being discussed and crafted, especially big stories, so that you can, cleanse the bias out, because bias is going to be perceived in almost everything we write, right? And the only way we can get rid of it is being more conscious of the words we choose, the stories we choose, the people we choose to talk to. If we go back to the same well and we always hear the same voices, then, there's a perception that we're favoring one side or the other. I think it's been less of a problem in the local journalism world, which is where most of my career has been centered. But we are at a tipping point. People want accuracy, they want depth, they don't want to hear your opinion. And honestly, I've been listening as a viewer now longer than I've been, thought I'd ever be watching newscasts. And I can't tell you how many times I've thought to myself, I would never in my entire career have said that sentence on the air, because no one cares what Demetria thinks. I need to tell you what the research shows, the data shows, what people are saying, what other people have said, and attribute those things appropriately.
Kind of going along with that, how would you address information silos and the decreased importance of verified facts?
Yeah, again, it's people want to hear what they want to hear, right? We need to be challenged as consumers of media. The best way to hone, how many people studied debate in high school? And the best way to prepare for debate is to thoroughly listen to the other side and craft your argument for, against, or in agreement, right? So if we can kind of put that same mindset out when we're looking for sources, and I'm not saying go listen to someone that you totally disagree with all day long, 24/7, because I think that would raise your blood pressure a bit, but be open to at least hearing the other side, and seek out some of those sources and give them a read or give them a listen. Like I said, it might infuriate you and you turn it off, but something in there will hopefully inform and enlighten the way you approach the subject.
This one's quite interesting. We have seen news journalists, particularly on a national level, become celebrity. What's your response to the celebrity journalist?
Again, and I think there's some fantastic reporters out there. I got giddy when I first saw Barbara Walters, rest in peace. I thought I got to get and this is before selfies too, I've got to get a picture made. And those people were trailblazers, but these days, you become, whether you like it or not, sort of a local celebrity. It's crazy funny because when I started my career, I have this long ethnic name and I was going to the South, and, Demetria, that sounds like a disease more than a person, and to this day, people will still lovingly mispronounce my name a couple times a day when I see them on the street. And I always remember, though, if someone's excited to see you, if you become sort of a celebrity or someone that they know and can trust and recognize, you've got to give them that moment of affirmation and attention. When I was in the 4th grade, the local CBS sports guy named Johnny Majors came to our elementary school. And you would have thought the president of the United States came in. I was so in awe because I was a news junkie kid, and even when I'm having the worst day of my life, I always think to myself, remember you and Johnny Majors and how he was nice to you and how he took a moment to speak. And it's so important. You've got a lot of theater majors and other people at Wesleyan who go on to become important and famous people. And I'm not saying that journalists should be famous, but it's the world we live in right now. It's what these people do with their recognition and their platform that's important.
Yeah, and again, we're seeing, social media play such an important role in that. I know most journalists that I follow have their own social media pages, right? So you're getting that personal aspect now, in addition to their news opinion, which has also been interesting to see.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm not going to knock social media completely. Social media has made effective on-camera communicators of a lot of young people who wouldn't have had that opportunity. I never got to practice in front of a Facebook Live or something like that. So I'm not going to knock it completely because I think it's helping some on-camera performers improve.
Alrighty, I have two more here. And then I think we'll be close on time. But do you have a favorite interview that you've done over the year? It can be at any point.
You know, there's so many. I'm going to say two things. The most surprising favorite interview that comes to mind is someone whose name no one knows. And it was long ago, and it was probably the first interview that really challenged my thinking. I was interviewing a rabbi in Memphis, and it was for a story about women in the clergy, which is again back in the news. It's amazing how the same things cycle around. But he introduced me to some thought processes that I had never occurred to me. I thought I was all prepared for this interview, and he kind of threw all my questions on an end and got me thinking in a different way. So that guy always stands out in my mind. Of course, I've done every country celebrity you could imagine, which has been cool. I did not get to interview Johnny or June. That was kind of a heartbreak for me. And I say this all the time, but of the thousands of people I've interviewed and the shoe boxes full of tape and CDs and cards and stuff that I have, I never sat down and interviewed my own parents, who are both gone. So I urge all of you to sit down and capture the stories of your own lives, because someone will treasure them down the line. What I wouldn't do to have the same amount of material on my parents that I do on politicians from the past. So, you know, I wish that was my wish. I could have interviewed someone. And there are certain people that were always just great go-tos, particularly, you know, the celebrity red carpet is the worst interview you could possibly do. Whoever learns anything on the red carpet other than who are you wearing? And are you excited to win? And, you know, are you glad you're nominated? I was much more interested in interviewing everyday folks than celebs.
Yeah. No, that's excellent advice. And last question here. You seem like a person who never really retires. So what is next?
Yeah, I hope I don't retire. You know, knock on wood, my health holds up, my energy holds up. You know, it goes back to that curiosity thing. Yeah. I can't think of stuff I don't want to know. It's a constant learning process, and journalism affords you the best seat in the house to learning something new. So even when I don't have any place to put it, I will probably still be creating videos, you know, maybe podcasts, maybe audio plays, maybe, you know, I will never write a book though, I'll tell you that much, because broadcast writing is far different from print writing. I don't think I'd be capable of writing something that was longer than a couple of pages. I hope I can do what I'm doing for a long time. And the beauty is that the cost of the technology has gone down so much that really anybody can do a beautiful piece of work these days, even with your iPhone or whatever, Android. I shouldn't use, you know, brand names, but you know, it's become a citizen world of creativity. There's no barriers anymore for cost or access in many cases. And, you know, you can go on vacation and probably make something just as good as National Geographic. So, you know, it's a big world out there, a lot of stories to tell, real people, true stories. As long as you stick with those, you're onto something good.
Well, Demetria, I cannot thank you enough for spending this last hour with us. I know you have such a busy schedule. And again, I learned so much. I hope everyone else did as well. I already am thinking of questions I could ask in a part 2 because I have so many. And I hope we get a part 2 with you and Allie as well, because it's just been very cool to watch two Titans do that together.
Well, listen, I love reconnecting with Illinois Wesleyan. I've reconnected recently with a lot more of my sorority sisters. that kind of thing happens as you grow older. You get longing for, homecoming and everything else. And again, I had a wonderful foundation there. I continue to grow upon it, and I talk it up every chance I get. So rah, rah, Wesleyan.
Well, we thank you. And again, thank you so much for everything today. Thank you to all of our attendees. Reminder that recording is going to be sent to your email inboxes since you signed up. And again, if you can fill out that survey as well, it is much appreciated. We have another Titan Talk scheduled for July, which we will be getting emails about as well. And again, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful upcoming 4th. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.